everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video we are doing a fall themed card. I'm trying to get into the fall spirit even though it is like 1,000,000 degrees here still in Texas at the time of this filming. I'm trying to get in fall. I wish fall would get here, so we're going to encourage it, quote unquote, with the fall card. So I apologize if you can hear thunder and rain. We're having a much needed rain shower, so I apologize if you can hear that in the background. So the first thing is first, I have some Catherine Pooler inks here. I chose some kind of jewel tones. There is Terracotta and Spruce. I have my ink blending brushes and a stencil here. If you know where the stencil is from, please drop that in the comments below. I am not entirely sure who made this stencil, but any stencil would work. And then I have this color layering. This is the Hero Arts, what's it called? Color Layering Peonies bunch. And I'm not using the actual stencils today. I know that's a shocker for me. I am just using the stamp and the die for today's video. So I'm gonna essentially stencil in this background and then stamp the floral bunch in black and white and leave that plain. So if you watched my previous video, I did a somewhat similar technique where I colored in the background and then I left the florals or the focal image white. I have mentioned this in previous videos. I am not a huge fan of coloring. I occasionally have moods where I want to color, but for the most part, that's really not my jam. And so I like color layering stencils. I like color laying stamps just because they give me that color without me having to put forth so much work. And so whenever I have the chance, if I have a way to color without coloring, I'm going to take it. So, and that also, if you find that you are in a time crunch, if you're just not in the mood to color but you need to make a card, this is something very easy to do that makes a card come together rather quickly. So all I'm doing here is taking those two inks that I mentioned from Catherine Pooler, the Terracotta and the Spruce, and I am just very messily ink blending in this background. I'm trying to get roughly 3 spots of each of these colors. Now these are more of like an orange and a green, so they are going to make kind of a brown when they mix together. But one of the reasons why I love fall is that brown is fine for fall. If you were concerned about that, if you didn't want to have brown, you could ink blend a little more carefully so that they don't overlap as much, or you could pick colors that when they do overlap, they make another complementary color, but not brown. So that's just something to keep in mind. But for this, I didn't mind the brown. I thought it was kind of pretty. So I'm just bringing in my stamp set just to ensure that I like the amount of ink I have down. This image is going to pretty much go in the center, so I'm not too worried about how the center looks, but I do want the edges to look nice. So in order to get my paper off of my little makeshift sticky mat here, I bend the mat and not the paper. When you do that way, you don't bend your paper and it comes off rather easily. To clean not only my stencil but this mat, I just take my stamp cleaner and spray it on there and then use my flour sack cloth to wipe everything off. And that's how I get not only my sticky mat clean, but my stencil. And I always try to remember to put its protective sheet back on so that I don't get dust or embossing powder or glitter or my hands or whatever in it. And it just will extend the life of my mat here. And here I'm just cleaning off the stencil just exactly how I did the mat. For the stamp image, I'm going to use my VERSAFINE just because I like how crisp and dark and rich the black is. And I have placed this in my mini MISTI with just a piece of Paper Studio cardstock. Because I'm not doing any fancy techniques to it, the quality of the white cardstock isn't necessarily super important. And so I need to work through this Paper Studio cardstock. So I'm going to end up stamping this 3 or 4 times just to ensure that I have a very crisp, clean image. I then used its coordinating die and die cut that out, and I also die cut out from scrap cardstock 3 more times that same image, and I'm going to use my liquid glue and layer them all together just so that this has just a little bit more dimension and heft to it. It gives this card a little bit more interest, as it could very easily be a very single layer or almost single layer card, but I wanted to add just a little bit more interest, and so I'm going to layer this image up. I'm using wet glue because it gives me just a little bit of wiggle room to wiggle this right into place. Once I've done that, just to kind of clean up these edges a little bit, I'm taking a black marker. You could use any marker at this point, but I'm using a MEMENTO TUXEDO black marker, and I'm just going around the edges. This is going to make it look like I cut this a little cleaner, and it's going to hide the fact that I use scrap cardstock to die cut that out. I run that along the edges all the way from the back, so that if my marker slips, it doesn't slip onto my image, it slips to the back where nobody's going to see it. I wanted to have a little bit of a border, I thought, and I'm glad I did. I thought about just layering this down exactly how it was and making it a full panel, but I did want to have some of that craft cardstock peeking through, although you very well could forget this step and just adhere it in its entirety down. When I set out, I was going to make this a portrait card, but as it went along, I liked it better as a landscape. So here I am just making sure that I like the margins I have and that everything looks well. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue this down flat, not only the card panel, the background, but also the florals. And I'm just going to use my liquid glue and glue both of those down flat. My sentiment is coming from the Simon Says Stamp Thankful Magnolia stamp set. I purchased it for this beautiful magnolia image, but it has some really wonderful and good sized fonts and a variety of fonts and sentiments in it. So I was going to do this grateful, but then I realized that it has this with gratitude, and I liked that better, and I thought that it fit on my card better. So I'm actually going to stamp that out, and I do stamp that out a few times. And I'm using Gina K Amalgum ink for that, just because I was going to do some ink blending over the top of this, and I didn't want to have to heat set it or wait for my VERSAFINE to dry, although I do end up heat setting this just a little bit anyway, but that is the ink I'm using right now. So I am going to ink blend over this just to help it kind of match the card a little bit better, although you would not have to do that if you did not want to. Here I'm just using my heat gun to heat set that. So I'm going to take those same two inks that I used on the background, and from the bottom I'm going to ink blend the terracotta, and then from the top I'm going to ink blend the spruce. And I'm going to occasionally bring in that die that you see in the top right corner. That is from, I believe, Simon Says Stamp, if I'm not mistaken. It's a Stitch Sentiment banner die, just to make sure that I've got enough ink over this to cover this entire image for when I go to die cut it out. And then once I'm happy with the blend, I am going to use that die and die cut it out, and then we're going to adhere that to the card. Part of this sentiment is actually going to overlap those flowers, and those flowers are popped up because remember we layered those up. So I am taking some Altenew Instant Dimension foam tape, and I'm going to apply that where it is not going to overlap the florals. So it's pretty much the bottom of that sentiment is where it's not going to overlap. And so that's where I'm going to apply that foam tape, just so that it's fairly even all the way across and there isn't any sagging areas. As a final bit of embellishment, I went through my stash and I found these kind of dark olivey green pearls from, I believe I purchased these off of Amazon, and I just spread those along the florals and the background, and that will finish off the card. So I appreciate you spending time with me. I hope that you are getting into the fall mood and spirit. I am not big into Halloween, but I do love fall, and so a lot of the cards for this time of year will be more fall themed than Halloween, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. Anyway, that is the card for today. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I appreciate you. I hope you feel inspired, and we will see you next time. Bye.